All right. So welcome everyone. So we are into the fourth session of social network analysis. So with this, we will start with our today's lectures. So before starting our lecture, let's take a quick recap of what we have done till now. So basically, like in the first lecture, I motivated you towards this subject and told you various different applications of social media analytics and like what all are the problems that can be solved and how like it is an important field that need to be studied. Next, we started our second module. In the second module, we basically tried to understand that why studying NLP along with social network analysis is important. So it is important because most of the data on the internet is in the form of text. So we need to know various techniques that are available in order to understand that text and in order to make informed decisions. Okay, so now like after discussing NLP along with social media data, now we come into the third module that we are going to discuss in today's lecture. Just give me a second. Yeah, so in today's lecture, we will mostly be covering the network measures. Okay, so till now we have covered that whatever data we have that can be presented in the form of networks. So whatever social media network we have, mostly it is in the form of networks. Okay, so that is why understanding these network and these network structures is very important. Okay, so we have seen that like starting from the Twitter data to the Facebook to the citation networks, even the biological networks, the internet. So all these data is in the form of networks. Even we saw that we have various other transportation network like airline network, the railway network, the road network. So these are all the examples of networks. So most of the data around us is in the form of networks. Okay, so once we have understood that most of the data is in the form of networks, now next very step that is that how do we understand this network data? Okay, so how do we make sense out of this network data? So in order to understand that, we need to understand the structure of the networks. Okay, so for understanding the structure of the networks, for understanding like what all groups are present in the network, we need to understand the network measures. Okay, so if we have a complete understanding of network measure, then maybe we will be able to solve more complex problems that are there in the networks. Okay, so now the next few lectures will be focused more on understanding the networks or the graph algorithms or the basics behind the graphs. So the questions that you will be asked from these modules can be numericals. So there can be numericals that can be asked like on various different aspects, like calculate the shortest path, or how will you calculate a degree or betweenness centrality. So mostly the syllabus in this module, the questions that are going to come in the exam in this module will be numerical based. So like while I cover these concepts, it's very important you grab these concepts and you really understand that what is the maths behind these concepts. Okay, and like if there is any doubt anywhere, you can stop me and we can discuss further on that particular topic there onwards. So yeah, so like these are this is the slide that discuss that why understanding network measures is important. So firstly, like this is a very important problem in the social media, that we need to identify that what all are the key players. For example, when we are trying to understand the epidemiology network. So what is epidemiology network? It is the network where we try to understand that how diseases spread in the network. Okay, so in those types of network, you are mostly interested in identifying the most important nodes, or the nodes from which there is high probability of spreading these diseases. Okay, so this is identified by understanding the centrality in the network. Okay, and there are different ways in which centrality can be defined, starting from degree centrality, betweenness centrality, eigencentrality, and closeness centrality. So there are various definitions to these centrality, which we will be discussing in more detail in the coming lectures. So for now, you need to understand this, that like using the network measures, you can really identify that which particular node is more important and which particular node is less important or less influential or less central in the network. Okay, so yeah, so in order to understand this, understanding network measure is important. Now coming to next part, the next important problem is that there are various problems in social media and analytics where we try to understand that how information flows or how the disease, for example, spreads in the network. So whenever you are trying to understand this, the measures like identifying the shortest path or clustering coefficient is very important. Okay, so if like the clustering coefficient is high, so clustering coefficient, it tells you that how good a particular cluster is. So if clustering coefficient is high, so definitely the information will spread more quickly in that particular group as compared to the other group where the clustering coefficient is low. On the other hand, like shortest path, so shortest path, again, like if you have the shortest path that has less number, okay, so it can be concluded that information will spread quickly if you have less length shortest paths. Then the next important thing is you need to identify the communities. So we will be studying various different network measures that are important for identifying communities or groups in the network. Okay, so these all are different measures that actually help you to understand the structure of the networks more clearly, like how the network is connected, where the density of the connection is more or less, whether there is some disconnection or not. So these are the different measures that help you to understand these types of prediction, these types of things. So next, like if you understand the structure of the network really well, then it can help you to predict the system behavior very well. So yeah, so that's why like understanding the network measures is really important. So now we will start with the maths behind the networks, or we will start with our network measures.
Ma'am, hello.
Yes, yes.
Ma'am, the shortest path is a network measure or it's a measure between two nodes?
It's the measure between two nodes. But yeah, see, when we are trying to analyze the networks, there are different measures at different levels. Okay, so I think I have covered this in the first lecture, that there are three different levels where we have these measures. The first one is the node measure, where we are actually trying to understand the property of a node. Okay, then we have the community measures. Okay, so where we try to understand the properties of a particular cluster. And third category comes, that is the network measure. So where you actually try to identify that what are the properties of the network as a whole. So shortest path, it not only tells you the property of like how two particular nodes are connected. So this is one way of seeing this. It is a node measure where you are trying to see that what is the length of the path between two nodes. Okay, then the other type, like you can also view it as the diameter of the network. Okay, so the diameter is a network measure, but in order to calculate diameter, you need to understand shortest path. So the shortest path, the longest shortest path in the entire network, that will gives you the diameter. Okay, so the shortest path, it can be seen as a network measure and it can be seen as a node measure. So I hope I addressed your answer.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. So yes. Okay, so first of all, we have the networks. So network and graph, these are the two terms that can be used interchangeably. So now next, the two most fundamental things in the network is the nodes and the edges. Okay, so how do we define the graph or the networks? Graph can be mathematically defined as GVE, where V is the set of vertices and E is the set of edges. Okay, so the set of the vertices can be represented in this way. So these are all the vertices that are there in the network. Okay, and next measure is the size of the network. So how do you define the size of the network? So size of the network can be defined as the number of nodes present and the number of edges present. So this is the mathematical representation of the size of the network. Okay, so if your network has n nodes, then the size will be represented in this way. Next, we have the edges. The edges can also be called as links or the ties. This is the subset of edges. Okay, so this contain all the edges that are there in the network, and size of the edges is represented in this way. Okay, it is mathematically written in this way. Okay, so now your network can either be directed or can be undirected. Okay, so the directed network is the one where the edges have associated direction to it. An undirected network is the one where we have bidirectional edges or where each edge do not have a direction associated to it. So now we have this very important node measure that is called as degree. Okay, so what is degree? Degree is number of edges incident on a node. Okay, so I will repeat it again. So degree is number of edges incident on a node. What do I mean by this? Suppose I have this node and these are the edges that are incident on it. Okay, so by incident I mean that number of edges that are touching these node. Okay, so that becomes the degree of this node. So currently the degree of this particular node will be 5. Why 5? Because there are 5 different edges that are incident on this particular node. Okay, so now since we have this different notion of directed and undirected graphs, so how the degree measure changes in the directed graph. So suppose I have this graph. Okay, so suppose I have this network. Okay, so now in this particular network, what will be the degree? So degree in the directed graph is a combination of in degree and out degree. So in degree is number of edges that are incident in the inward direction. Okay, so in this particular case, the in degree of this node will be 2. Okay, the in degree will be 2. Why 2? Because number of edges that are incident on this particular node with inward direction are 2. Okay, and the out degree is the number of edges that are incident on the particular node with the outward direction. Okay, so out degree of this node is 1. So in the directed graphs, total degree of the entire network is in degree plus out degree. Okay, so the total degree of the entire network is total number of in degree and total number of out degree. Whereas when we are considering the bidirectional network or the undirected network, so we are only considering the edges, like the bidirectional edges. Okay, so yeah. Degree in an undirected network. If a node is connected to 5 other nodes, or if a node has 5 incident edges on it, so then the degree of the node is 5. Okay, so the term incident is very important. So this is the definition of degree, the number of edges that are incident on a particular node. Okay, now the degree in directional network. So whenever we have directions associated in the network, so we will have in the directed graph, every edge has a direction. Okay, so you know that in the directed graph every edge has a direction. So there are two types of degree because of these direction. One is the in degree and the other is out degree. So the number of incoming edges that are incident on a particular node are called as in degree. Sorry. And the number of outgoing edges, or the number of outgoing edges incident on a particular node, are called as out degree. The total degree of the directed graph, is in degree plus out degree. Okay. So these are the two different theorems that are associated with the degree. So understand that degree is again a fundamental measure that is very important to calculate other measures. Okay, so now these are the different theorems that are associated with the degree. The first one is the summation of degrees in an undirected graph is twice the number of edges. Okay, so anybody would like to tell that why the theorem says it like this, that the number of total number of edges in the graph, the total degree in the graph is twice the number of edges.
Because
Because in
each
undirected graph we don't have direction, so in and out are counted twice, and that's the reason we are doubling it.
Okay, yeah, so correct. So since what is total degree? Total degree is when we calculating the summation of degrees of all the nodes. Okay, so since like we are calculating the number of edges incident on a particular node, so each edge is incident on 2 nodes. Okay, so each edge is incident on 2 nodes, therefore each edge is counted twice when we are calculating the degree. So this is the reason behind this theorem. Then like we have this second lemma that is associated to directed graphs. So in a directed graph, the summation of in degree is equal to summation of out degree. So why it is so? Anybody would like to answer this? Summation of in degrees is equal to the summation of out degree.
Plus, ma'am, for each edge, it is once counted as in and once counted as out.
Correct,
Degree.
correct. So yeah, so these are two very basic theorems, and it can be intuitively understood by all of you with the reasoning that we have discussed just now. So yeah, so now let me give you one example. Okay, so we will take an example of directed graph. Okay, so the real world directed graph can be considered as like one of the example of the directed graph is the citation network. Okay, so in citation network, we have different papers, and these papers refer to the previous papers. Okay, so maybe this is paper 1, this is paper 2. So this paper cites the previous paper, the previously published paper. Okay, so the edges will always point backward in time in these networks. Okay, so maybe we have paper 2 cites paper 3, and even paper 1 cites paper 3. Okay, so yeah, so this is a citation network. Okay, so now there was a scientist named as Alfred Lotter. So Alfred Lotta, he tried to analyze this directed graph, the directed graph that is the citation network. So he tried to analyze different degrees of in the citation graph, and he identified one very important properties of these graphs. Okay, so what does this property says? This property says that the number of scientists who have k citations, or in other words, we can also say it as the number of papers who cite k other papers fall as k raised to power minus alpha for some constant alpha. Okay, so now let's discuss this law in detail. Okay, so this is a very important law that was discovered by Alford in 1926, and this law is popularly known as power law. Power law. Okay, so what does power law says? The power law says that the number of nodes with degree k, the number of nodes in the network with degree k, they decay with the function k raised to power minus alpha. Okay, so let me write this for you. Okay, so this is a very important principle for degree distribution. And it is popularly known as power law. So what this law says, the fraction or number of nodes in the network that have degree k. So this is the definition of degree distribution. What is degree distribution? Degree distribution is the number of nodes in the network that has degree k. Okay, I hope the definition of degree distribution is clear to you all. Degree distribution is how the degree is distributed in the network. Okay, so how we will calculate it? We will calculate it by identifying the fraction or identifying the number of nodes that have a particular degree k. For example, let me count the number of nodes in the network that has degree 1. Then let me count the number of nodes in the network that has degree 2. Then let me count the number of nodes in the network that have degree 3, 4, 5, and so on. Okay, so this particular law, it basically try to understand that how these degrees are distributed in the network. Okay, so the definition of degree distribution is the fraction of nodes. Okay, the fraction of nodes in the network that has degree k. Okay, so the law states that this fraction decays as k raised to power minus alpha for various real world networks. Okay, so after a lot of experimentation that was done by Alford, he identified that most of the networks in this world, most of the real world networks, they follow this power law. Okay, they follow this power law. So now let us take, so this is the mathematical notation of the power law, that the degree decay with this function, that is k raised to power minus alpha. So now let us try to understand that what do I mean by this particular function? What does this particular function tells us about the network? Okay, so like if I state this particular power law in simple words, it says that in a particular network. So let me explain it clearly. So in a network, the number of nodes that will have lower degree, the number in a network, there will be exponential nodes that will have lower degree, and there will be very few nodes that have very high degree. Okay, so let me repeat again. In the network, in the real world network, it generally happens that there are a lot of nodes with very low degree, and there are very less nodes with a very high degree. So this is the power law. Okay, there will be very less nodes that have very high degree. So let me give an example from the real world networks. So for example, in the citation network, there will be very, very few papers that have a very high number of citation, but there will be a lot of papers with low number of citations. Okay, so there will be very, very few papers that will have citations in thousands. But then if you consider like 1, 2, 3, if you consider these lower number of citations, there will be a lot of paper with lower number of citations. So now again, let us consider an example from social media networks. So let me consider an example of like a class. In a class or in a university, there will be very, very few students who are very popular, okay, and whom all the other people know. Whereas there will be like most of the people will have like very few people who knows them. Okay, so let me now rephrase this particular example. In a university, there will be very less people who have hundreds of friends. Okay, but on the other hand, most of the people will have like 4 or 5 friends. Okay, so now let me rephrase again the power law. The power law states that generally like most of the networks that we see in social media, okay, so generally these networks will follow this property. What is this property? The property is that in the network there will be exponentially large number of nodes that have lower degree, and there will be very, very few nodes that have exponentially large degree. Okay, I hope this law is clear to everyone. Is there any doubt up till now? Anyone? Okay, so yeah, so this is the degree distribution. When dealing with large graphs, how node degree are distributed is an important concept to analyze, and it is called as degree distribution. Okay, so in degree distribution, what we are trying to do is we are basically trying to identify the number of nodes that have degree K or degree D divided by total number of nodes. Okay, so this is the fraction of nodes that have degree K. Okay, so now what this is the pictorial representation of power law. So in this power law, we have the degrees on the x-axis, and on y-axis we have fraction of nodes that are having these degrees. Okay, so we can see that very, very few nodes will have very high degree. On the other hand, there will be a large number of nodes that have low degrees. Okay, so on the social network sites, there exist many users with few connections, and there exist a handful of users with very large number of friends. This is called as power law. So is the power law clear to everyone? Is the power law clear to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so how power law distribution is created? So we are saying that in the networks that we see in social media, generally like these network will follow this power law. So how this power law is created? Okay, so this is the reason behind the creation of the power law, that is called as preferential attachment. Okay, so what is preferential attachment? Preferential attachment is the principle that the likelihood of a new node making a connection to the existing node is proportional to the degree of the existing node. Okay, so for example, I am writing a research paper, maybe in visualization. Okay, so when I start my research, I'll generally see the papers that have a very, very high number of citations. So I'll consider those papers as the fundamental papers in visualization, and I'll start my research. Okay, so while writing the paper, I'll try to cite that particular paper. So this is called as preferential attachment. So I am preferring, or I am citing the paper that are already highly cited. Okay, so when I am trying to filter out the papers, what I have done is I have filtered out the papers that have high number of citations. Okay, so this is called as preferential attachment. So generally, like in the real world networks, we have this preferential attachment. So because of this preferential attachment, the new node that is coming, that has a very high likelihood to refer to the node with very high degree, or to form a connection with the node that already has a very high degree. Okay, so this power law, it is it describes this very popular saying, that is rich get richer. Okay, so we have this very popular saying, that is rich get richer. Why it gets richer? It gets richer because of power law or because of preferential attachment. So now, like we have spent a good amount of time in understanding the power law and in understanding this thing, that in social media networks, most of the networks will have this power law. Okay, now why this power law is so interesting? So what this power law is further telling us about the network? Is there any specific property that this power law conveys us? So the answer is yes. Okay, so this power law, whenever a network follows a power law, it automatically makes the network scale-free networks. Okay, so now next we need to understand what all are the scale-free networks. So scale-free networks results in self-similar topologies or fractals. Okay, so it will be very interesting if you people search these words fractals and try to understand what all are the fractals in the networks. So let me explain you. Okay. So now if like our social media network, it obeys power law. So if it obeys power law, it will be a scale-free network. So what do if a network is scale-free, it makes the network self-repeating topology. What do I mean by this? So suppose I have this basic structure in the network. If my network is scale free, then this particular structure will be again and again repeated throughout the network. Okay. So these are called as fractals. This is called as fractal in the network. So how my network will look like? So if you see, this particular fractal is repeated in the entire network. Okay, so my network will look something like this. Okay, so now you can understand this, that power law is basically telling us the very important property about the structure of the network. That is, it has fractals. It has certain small unit of topology that is again and again repeated in the entire network. So now this power law, the networks that follow power law, they also follows another important property. So suppose I have this network and I remove all the periphery nodes in this network. Okay, so even if I remove all the periphery nodes in the network, okay, by periphery nodes, I mean that all the nodes that are lying on the border or that has degree 1. Okay, so if I remove all the border nodes, okay, again, like the remaining network that I have, again, it will follow the power law. Okay, so now I would like to explain you mathematically what is this scale-free network. Okay. Mathematical representation of scale-free networks. What do I mean by mathematically? What do I mean by scale-free networks? If you have function fx and a linear scaling is applied. If you have a function fx and a linear scaling is applied on the independent variable, that is, suppose x was my independent variable and I apply linear scaling. Suppose a is a constant, so I apply a linear scaling to this function x, this independent variable x, and it becomes ax. Then the function form does not change. Okay, so what is the mathematical definition of scale-free networks? The mathematical definition of scale-free networks is that if you have a function fx, so if you have a function fx and you apply linear scaling, okay, and you apply linear scaling, by linear scaling, I means that you need to multiply it with a constant, okay. So if I apply linear scaling to this function, then the form of this function will not change. Okay, so now let us consider the function that we had for power law. So the function that we had for power law was fx is equal to a x raised to power minus alpha. Okay, so now here I'm applying, okay, now here my a and alpha are constants. Now let me apply a linear scaling to this function. Let us suppose it is ax. Okay, now the function forms ax raised to power minus alpha. This can be written as a raised to power minus alpha, x raised to power minus alpha. So because you know that a is a constant and the small a is again a constant, okay? So this whole value again becomes a constant. So this can be written as a dash x raised to power minus alpha. Okay, so now if you see this equation number 1, and you see this equation number 2, you see that the form of these two functions are not changing. Okay, so that's why all the networks that follow power law, that are scale-free networks. So up till now, any doubt, anyone? Any doubt, anyone? Up till now? Okay, so let me give a quick recap of this concept. So we have studied that most of the networks, most of the social media networks, they will follow the power law. Okay, so what is power law? Power law is that most of the nodes in the network will have low degree, whereas there will be very few nodes in the network that will have very, very high degree. Okay, so now the next is whenever we have a network that follows power law, that network is automatically a scale-free network. Okay, so now if a network is scale free, it tells a very important property about the structure of the network. So that important property is that this particular network will have repeating fractals in it. Okay, so then we can identify these repeating fractals and we get an idea about the network and we can analyze the network accordingly. So yeah, so this is all about the power law. Okay, so now next we have a few definitions that we will discuss. So now what is a subgraph? Okay, so let's discuss what is a subgraph. Subgraph is the part of the original graph. Okay, so what will a subgraph contain? Subgraph will contain the subset of original vertices that a network has, and it will contain the subset of edges that the original network had. Okay, so for example, I have this particular network. Okay, in this particular network, we have deleted this edge. So now the new set of edges do not have this particular edge. Okay, so it do not have this edge. So that's why like it forms a subgraph. Okay, so now let's take a quick break of 10 minutes and then we will be back. We will discuss that how the graph can be represented. So this is very important for the programming aspect. So because like when we are trying to code and when we are programmatically trying to solve the graph problems, we need to know that how these are represented. Okay, so these are the three important ways in which the networks are represented. So we will be discussing what all are the advantages, when you should use a particular representation, when you should not use a particular representation. So all those aspects we will cover in detail. So now it is 6:44. We'll meet at 6:54 next. Okay, so hello everyone, welcome back. So let's continue our discussion on the network measures. So yeah, okay, so next we are going to discuss that how do we represent the graphs to the computer. Okay, so whenever we are using these programming languages like the Python, and we are trying to calculate various different network measures or communities. So what is the input that we give to these codes? Okay, so how is my network represented in when I am like giving the network as an input to a program? Okay, so there are three different ways in which the networks can be represented. So first one is the adjacency matrix. So this is one of the most popular way of representing the networks. So let us discuss like how the adjacency matrix look like. So suppose I have n nodes. Okay, so if I have n nodes, then we will have n rows and n columns. Okay, so for example, in this case, we have 6 nodes here. Okay, so in the adjacency, we have 6 cross 6 matrix. By 6 cross 6 matrix, we mean that there will be 6 rows and 6 columns. Now there are like 6 cross 6 cells in this metric. Okay, so now each of the cell can represent two vertices. That is, for example, if I consider this one, if I consider this particular cell, so this cell tells the relation between V5 and V4. Okay, so yeah, so each cell represents that whether two particular nodes are connected or not. Okay, so yeah, so each cell will represent that whether two nodes are connected or not. So if the value is 0, that means that these two nodes do not have an edge. But if the value is 1, that means that there is an edge between these two nodes. Okay, so this is the adjacency matrix. So like, what do you think? Are there any limitations to this representation? What all are the limitations if I try to
Di-
identify? Yes.
Direction cannot be shown, right? I mean, it is from V1 to V2 or V2 to V1.
Okay, so yeah, so with the adjacency matrix, see, currently, if you clearly observe this matrix, it is a symmetric matrix. How symmetric matrix? For example, I have a connection between V1 and V2 here. I will also have a connection that is from V2 to V1. So this is V1 is connected to V2, and this is V2 is connected to V1. Okay, so this is a symmetric matrix that is representing both V1 from both the relation between V1 and V2 and from V2 to V1. So when we are trying to represent the directed graphs, this particular matrix will not be a symmetric matrix. Okay, so here, if you clearly observe, whatever is there, whatever matrix is there above this particular diagonal is same as the matrix below the diagonal. Okay, so there are like these both are mirror images on the diagonal. This is the diagonal and the matrix is mirror image, or matrix is completely symmetric. So for the undirected graphs, we have this symmetric matrix, whereas when we have the directed networks, we will not have the symmetric networks. So in the directed networks, we might have a connection that is V1 to V2, but this might be missing. Okay, so if like I do not have a directed edge from V2 to V1, so then this particular one might be 0 in that case. So the directions can definitely be represented using the adjacency matrix. But there is another limitation. Anybody else can identify that?
Indirect linkages cannot be shown here. We can show the direct, like V2 is connected to V4 here, and V2 is connected via V3 as well, so which is not represented in this matrix.
Okay, so yeah, I think you are trying to say that the paths
Yeah.
between two nodes are difficult to identify. Yeah, that is considered as the disadvantage of the matrix. Anything else? So matrix, so if we have this kind of pictorial representation, then it's really easy to see the paths. But when we have matrix representation, identifying paths is difficult visually. Anything else?
There is no self connection V1 to V1, V2 to V2. That
Okay,
is
so
not that.
yeah, so whenever there are loops in the network, so if I have a loop here, that is V2 is connected to V2 itself, so then we can put a one like one here. So this might not be 0 in that case. This can be changed to 1 if loops have. So loops can be represented by matrix representation. What about the space that it is taking? Is it taking more space or less space? Any disadvantage related to space?
The line at the bottom says it's a very sparse matrix. And yes, and since you mentioned the space, it's taking huge amount of space. It's wasting space.
Correct. So currently, since there are only 6 nodes, okay, currently I'm seeing only 6 nodes here. So like it looks like a good representation to, present a network. But then imagine if I have, for example, 30,000 nodes. Okay, so in that case, we will have 30,000 into 30,000. So that numbers of cell I need in order to store this information. So that is a huge. And on the other hand, this particular network that has these 30,000 nodes might be sparse. So there might be very less connections. So in order to store those less connection, we need that much space. So these are not very good to represent very large networks. Also, when the network is not dense, this particular representation is not good. So I would say I would rather like to frame it in a way that this representation is good for small small networks that are dense. Okay, so whenever my network is dense, or whenever like I have like smaller networks like 100 nodes, 200 nodes, maybe I can use matrix representation. But beyond that, it will be taking a lot of space, and we should avoid the space utilization, because when it take a lot of space, obviously, like in order to process those many cells, the computation will also take more time. Okay, so it is going to take more computational time when we are using matrix as the base for calculating our other matrix or our other measures. So in order to avoid these limitations, we have the adjacency list. Okay, so you might have studied the data structures linked list. Okay, so this particular representation is very similar to the linked list representation that we study in the data structures. So in this, like we will have this node, and the node along with the node, we will have a list of the nodes to which this particular node is connected. Okay, so this is this is much better representation than the adjacency matrix when we have the sparse matrix, and when the network size is huge. By network size, I mean that when like a lot of nodes are there. So this is one of the representation. And this is another representation. Just give me a second. Okay, so this is the third representation, that is edge list. So whenever like I have dealt with huge data, okay, so huge network data, so generally I have seen that the networks are stored in the form of edge lists. So this is I think like if you download any network data from the popular websites like UCLA and all, they have like a lot of network data. If you download your data sets, your network data from these websites, it will be generally in the form of edge list. So edge list amongst these is one of the most popularly used representation of the network. So yeah, so with this, we have covered the topic, that is how do we represent the networks. So is there any doubt up till now?
So, ma'am,
What is
what
the
is
best?
best and more common?
The best is edge list. Edge list representation is the best amongst these. But then like there can be certain algorithms that work fast with the adjacency lists. For example, if you want to calculate the degree, okay, so degree calculation will be really fast if you have this kind of representation. So yeah, but like most commonly and most popularly used representation is the edge lists. This one. Anything else? Okay. So now next, like when we are dealing with this social media networks, okay, so another important thing that we need to understand is that the networks or the graphs can be of different types. So this lecture will act as a dictionary, and it will give you an overview of what all different options or what all different types of graphs are there. So firstly, we will be studying all these different types of graphs. So these are null or empty networks. Then we have directed, undirected, mixed. We have simple multigraphs, weighted, signed graphs, and web graphs. So let's one by one discuss each one of these. So firstly, we have the null graphs. So null graph is nothing but an initialization of the graph. So I don't know, like you might have attended the webinar that happened this week. So they might have discussed the library network X. So in network X, we sometimes initialize the graph. Okay, so when you initialize the graph, that is a null graph. So null graph will have no nodes and no edges, but it will be initialized. Okay, so one of the practical example is that, for example, you want to programmatically simulate the conversation network or the interaction network. So you have some people in the room, but like if people are interacting, only then you insert an edge in the network. So in that case, initially you will have a null graph. Okay, so there are different scenarios, there are different algorithms that require null graph to start with. Okay, so for example, like whenever we form spanning trees, we will be studying that how do we calculate the spanning trees, what is the importance. So whenever you calculate the spanning trees, initially you start with null graph. Okay, so null graph is an empty graph which do not have any vertices and which might not have any edges. Okay, so this is called the null or an empty graph. And is it the null graph or the empty graph is important for a lot of other network-based algorithms. Next, we have directed and undirected graphs. So directed and undirected graphs we have discussed in detail up till now. The directed graph will have some directions associated to the edges, and the undirected graph will have the bidirectional edges. So we might have a third type of a network where we have the mixed edges. It have bidirectional edges and directional edges. Okay, so yeah, and we have already discussed this, that whenever we have an undirected graph, we will have symmetric adjacency matrix. So I've shown you before in this example itself, like we have discussed it, that when you have undirected graph like this, you have this symmetric matrix, which is symmetric along the diagonal. On the other hand, if you have directed edges, the directed edges will not be symmetric. So yeah, so in the directed adjacency matrix, your AIG might not be equal to AJI, whereas in the undirected network, AIJ is always equal to AJI. Now there are this next type of graphs, that is simple graph and multi-graphs. So what is simple graph? Whenever any two nodes can have just one edge, so that is called as simple graph. Okay, but when we allow multiple edges between two nodes, okay, multiple edges and loops between the nodes, that is called as multi-graphs. So the adjacency matrix of multigraph will include the numbers. So instead of representing ones and zeros here, we will have the number of edges. Suppose between V2 and V3, I have three multiple edges. Okay, so suppose I have three multiple edges, then in this particular matrix, the V2 to V3, this particular cell will not have 1, but it will have the value 3. So this is how we represent the multigraphs using adjacency matrix. Okay, so next we have these weighted graphs. So in weighted graphs, the edges might have the weight. Okay, so for example, we have the network of different airports. So the number of flights that are running between one airport to another airport can be considered as weight of the edge. Okay, so now that weight can again be represented in adjacency matrix. So yeah, so like I have told you in the last example, for the multigraph, we changed the value to 3. So similarly, each cell can have these weights in the adjacency matrix. Okay, so yeah, so this is the representation for weighted graphs. So then we have another type of graphs, that is signed graphs. So signed graphs can have these positive and negative signs in the networks. So can anyone give me an example of signed graph? So when do we require to use signs in the graph, or what is an example of signed graph in social media or social networks? Anybody can think of an example where we will need these positives and negative signs.
Does it have like a direction thing of negative and positive thing? Good opinion, bad opinion?
Correct. So positives and negatives are generally associated with something that is positive and something that is negative. So when representing the social network, for example, I have a network of a class. Okay, so I can represent all the people who are my friend with a positive edge and all the people who are my enemy with a negative edge. Okay, so these are the cases when we when we want to represent the positive emotion and the negative emotion. In those cases, we use these sign networks for analysis. So it can also be used to represent social status and all. Okay, so now next we will be seeing what all are the web graphs. So web graphs, although we have briefly discussed in our first lecture, so let me again tell you what all are the web graphs. So in web graphs, each web page represents a node, and if one page has an hyperlink to another page, then there is a directed edge from one page to the another page. Okay, so this is the web graph. The web graph is a way of representing how internet sites are connected on the web. Okay, in general, a web graph is a directed multi-graph. So it allows multiple edges in the network. Okay, the nodes are represent the sites, nodes represent the sites or the web pages, and edges represent the link between these sites, that are the hyperlinks. Okay, so if one page has a hyperlink to another page, so then this page will have directed edge from this page to another page. Two sites can have multiple links pointing to each other, and they can also have loops. Okay, so yeah, so this is web graph. Graph can have multiple edges. Web graph can have loops. Web graph is a directed graph. There will be a directions from one web page to another web page, and like we have already discussed, what all will be the nodes or the edges in this case. Okay, so next, again, there are a huge set of problems in graphs. Sorry. Okay. So again, there are a huge set of problems in networks that are based on the paths. Okay, so for example, you want to know that how fast the information is spreading in the network. In those cases, also like fundamentally, we need to calculate the paths, and we need to see that like what is the longest path in the network, what is the shortest path in the network, and so on. Then there can be problems like, for example, you want to identify in railway networks, you want to identify that how the maintenance should carry out. Okay, so you want to make the roadmap of the maintenance of different track. So you want to minimize the cost. In that case, you want to know, okay, this station I should maintain first, then next this station we should target. This is the most important station. I should next target this station. So you want to make that roadmap, that what, like in which sequence I should carry out the maintenance. So similarly, we have this pipeline network. In the pipeline network also, you want to identify like how the maintenance should be carried. So there are a huge set of problems that can be solved by understanding these terms, that is walk, path, trails, tours, and cycles. So now next we will discuss these terms. Okay, so two nodes are adjacent. When we say that two nodes are adjacent if and only if these two nodes are connected with an edge. Okay, so whenever two nodes are connected with an edge, we call it that these two nodes are adjacent to each other. Next is incident. So I have already stressed a lot on the incident and edges that are incident. So two edges are incident if they share a common endpoint. Okay, so two edges will be incident on a node if they share the same endpoint or the same node. So this definition of incident is important when we calculate the degree. When the graph is directed, the edges have direction. So we have already studied it. The edges in the graph can be traversed when one starts at one of its end nodes, moves along the edges, and stops at the other end. Okay. So we traverse the edges when we move from one edge to another. So that is called as edge traversal. So when the edges are interconnected and you are moving from one edge to another, that is called as traversal of the edges. So now next we will be discussing these terms. So first of all is walk. Okay, so what is walk? So walk will be more clear with this example. Okay, so when you start from a node and these nodes are connected by the edges and you try to follow these edges. Okay, so when you try to follow these edges, the number of nodes and the edges, the nodes as well as the edges can repeat. Okay, so when you are trying to traverse these nodes and edges in such a way that the nodes and the edges can be repeated, that is called as a walk. So a walk is a sequence of incident edges. Okay, the sequence of incident edges visited one after another. So if I start from V1, so V1 to V3, okay. So then from V3, maybe I move to V6, okay. So now from V6, I can only move to V4. So let me move to V4. So now from V4, I again decide to move to V3. Then again, I visit V6, then V4, then maybe I visit V2, and then V5. So you see that in this particular example, I have 2 times repeated this circle. Okay, so in this particular case, the nodes and the edges were again and again traversed, or I was repeating the edges or repeating the nodes that are already visited. So such kind of sequence is called as a walk. Okay, now a walk can be an open walk or it can be a closed walk. So what is open walk? The open walk is if you start from one point and you end at some other point. Okay, so there can be repeating nodes and edges, but you end at some other point. So that is called as an open walk. On the other hand, if you start from one node and you end at the same node, even after repeating the nodes and the edges, that is called as a closed walk. For example, if I start from V3, from V3, I move to V6, V4, V3, V6, V4, V3. So I stop here. So this is a closed walk. So why it is a closed walk? Because I started from V3 and I ended at V3. So I hope the definition of walk is clear to everyone. Okay. Then there is another important definition. What is the length of the walk? The length of the walk is the number of visited edges. So when you are calculating the length, you need to calculate these number of edges that you are visiting. Okay. So for example, if I am starting from V1, okay, and I from V1, I move to V3, V6, V4, and then V3. Suppose this is the walk that I am taking. So in this case, what will be the length of the walk? Anybody? What will be the length of the walk if I start from V1, V3, V6, V4, and V3 again?
5.
So I think the
4.
answer is 4,
4.
right?
4.
Yeah. Yes, yes. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we will calculate the number of the edges. So remember that when we are calculating the length of the path or the length of the walk or the length of the path or the length of the trail. So whenever we are trying to calculate these lengths, we always need to calculate the number of edges that are there on the sequence. Okay. Okay, so now let us discuss the definition of trail. So what is trail? A trail is a walk where no edge is visited more than once. Okay, so you cannot again and again visit the edges, but your vertices can repeat. Okay, so for example, like in this case, V1, V3, V6, V4, and V3 again. So the example that we considered last time, that is a trail. So a trail is a walk itself. So trail is a subset of walk. So a trail is a walk where no edge is repeating. Okay, so the edge should not repeat, but the vertices can repeat. So that is called as a trail. Then we have another definition, that is a closed trail. A closed trail is that if you start from a node and then you end at the same node. So that is called as a trail. A closed trail, and it is also called as a tour or a circuit. Okay. So next comes the definition of path. So a path is a walk where neither the nodes nor the edges should repeat. Okay, so where the nodes and edges are distinct is called as path. And a closed path is called as cycle. So we can have a path where only the starting and the ending node is repeating. That will be called as a cycle. So again, the length of the path or the cycle is the number of edges visited in the path or the cycle. Okay. So yeah, can you give me an example of a path in this particular diagram? Can anyone want give me an example of a path in this particular
V6,
diagram?
V4, V2, V5.
What?
V6 to V4, V4 to V2, V2 to V5 is a path.
Correct, correct. And cycle?
Cycle is a continue from V5 to V6, then becomes a cycle.
Correct, correct, correct. So this is the definition of path. So I hope these three definition and these three distinctions are clear to everyone. So yeah, so with that, we will move to our next definition. Next, we have something called as Euler tour. So an tour is a closed walk in the graph that starts and ends at the same vertex. And uses every edge exactly once. Okay, so this is one of the constraint in Euler path, that every edge should be visited exactly once. Okay, so you should not repeat the number of times you are visiting an edge. So what are the main points? The vertices may repeat, but the edges must not repeat. It must cover all the edges in the graph. So these are the three constraints. If these three constraints are followed, then that particular tour is called as Euler tour. Okay, and Euler tour, again, it has a lot of applications. When, like, I have given you that example of railway maintenance or postal deliveries. So whenever you are trying to solve problems in those domains, you need to know the definition of Euler tours. Then we have Hamilton cycle. A cycle that visits all the nodes is called as a Hamilton cycle. So now next comes the definition of a random walk. Now, why are we studying a random walk? Why it is important? Anybody knows the answer?
Madam, it's found in nature, Brownian motion.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, so we will be studying this page rank algorithm. Okay, so the page rank algorithm by Google. Okay, so which helps you to rank the pages. Like when you search a particular topic on the Google, it gives you the pages. So these pages are ranked by page rank algorithm. So PageRank algorithm is very important algorithm in social network analysis. So we are going to study that, and this forms the basics for that particular algorithm. Okay, so yeah, so that's why, like, we are currently studying the random walk. What is random walk? So a random walk, that in each step the next node is selected randomly. Okay, so now suppose you are trying to traverse the entire network. Okay, so now you are at a particular node. So when you are at a particular node, you do not know that, like, which other node should be selected. So now the next node is selected randomly. Okay, so the next node is selected randomly. This is called as a random walk. So another analogy to random walk is, for example, I give you a car, and maybe I give you a city, for example, Bangalore. Okay, so now I give you a coin and I tell you, and let us suppose there is a constraint that, like there are two options, either to go right or to go left. Okay, so your roads are designed such that at each junction there are two options. You can either go right or left. Okay, so now I give you a coin. Okay, so you have this car and I give you the coin and I tell you that at each junction you should roll this, you should toss this coin, and if it is head, you can go to right. If it is tail, you can go to left. Okay, so now I give you 20, like, for example, I give you 30 days. Okay, and we are, and you are doing this random walk. So what do you think by the end of 30 days? So suppose, let me assume that the city is of medium size. Okay, the city is of medium size. So what do you think? Will you be able to go to all the roads, or you would not visit all the roads? So how it is? What do you think? So I hope the problem is clear to you. So suppose I have a medium sized, all the road covers not possible. Okay.
Maybe you have only 50% chance of visiting the whole city.
Mm, the answer is incorrect. See, I gave you 30 days. Okay, so you have 30 days. You are again and again repeating. You are again and again repeating this experiment. So there are a very high chances that all the roads are visited in the city. So that's why, like, we do this, we use this random walk algorithm, algorithm in such important algorithms like PageRank algorithm. Okay, so you want to visit the entire network. So how you will visit? So this is one of the technique we use in such kind of algorithm. So yeah, we will be discussing this in more detail when we will discuss that algorithm. So yeah, for now, I wanted to give you this idea. Okay, this is random walk. When you randomly select that where you are visiting next. Okay. Okay, so this is the analogy that I was talking about. So mark a spot on the ground. So stand on the spot and flip a coin. Now, so if the coin turns out to be head, then you need to go to left direction. Otherwise, you go to right direction. So now if the coin comes to tail, okay. So now this is the random walk that we were talking about. And this random walk is used as part of the algorithm of some other algorithms that we will be studying in detail in the coming lectures. Okay, so that time we will be discussing this concept in a little more detail. For now, I only wanted to give you the basics of, or I only wanted to give you the intuition that what is random walk. Okay, so next comes connectivity. How do you say that two nodes are connected? So two nodes are connected if they have a path between them. Okay, so next comes the graph. Let's check that whether the graphs are connected or not. Okay, so now if you have an undirected graph and if there's a path from every node to every other node. Okay, so if every two nodes, every other node has a, if there's a path between every pair of nodes, then that particular graph is called as connected. Now, for the directed graphs, we have another two definition, that is a strongly connected and weakly connected. Okay, so now what is weakly connected? So if you convert all the edges, all the directed edges in the directed graph to bidirectional edges, and now there is at least one path between every pair of node. So that particular graph is called as a weakly connected graph. On the other hand, what is strongly connected? So suppose you have this directed graph, and in the directed graph, following the directions, every pair of nodes have a path between them. Okay, so every pair of node is connected to each other, then that is called as strongly connected component or strongly connected graph. Otherwise, your graph will be disconnected. So it will be more clear from this particular example. So in this particular example, this is the connected undirected graph. Why connected undirected graph? Because like every pair of node is reachable. Okay, so there's a path from every there's a path between every pair of nodes. Okay, so that's why this is a connected graph. This is an unconnected graph. or disconnected graph. Why? Because like from V4 to V3, there is no path. Okay, so in this particular graph, the definition that we discussed earlier does not apply. Okay, so what all are the connected graphs? Connected graph is that every pair of nodes should have a connection between them. Okay, so now let us see that what all are the strongly connected graphs. Strongly connected graph is the one when, like in the directed graph, I have paths from every node to every other node. Okay, so now let me check. So from V1, can I reach V2? Yes. From V1, can I reach V3? The answer is yes. From V1, can I reach V4? Yes, I can reach following this path. Then V5 can also be reached. And from V1, can I reach V6? So yes, so I can reach V6 through this path, V1, V2, V3, and V6. Okay, so now again, let us check that from V2, can I reach V1? The answer is correct. From V3, can I reach V1? The answer is correct. So we can reach through this path, V3 to V2, V2 to V1. From V4, can I reach V4 to V6, then V6 to V1. From V5, can I reach? And the answer is yes. V5 to V4, V4 to V6, V4 to V1. And then from V6, again, I can reach to V1. So even in the directed graph, every pair of node can be reached from each other. So that is why this is a strongly connected graph. On the other hand, this is a weakly connected graph. Why weakly connected graph? It is a weakly connected graph because if I convert these edges into bidirectional edges, then definitely this is a connected component. But on the other hand, if I consider the directions, then every node cannot reach every other node. Okay, so for example, I'll check that whether can I reach from V1 to V4. Let us check V1 to V2, V2 to V3. Okay, V4 can be reached.
V3 is a broken medium. If you try from V3, you cannot reach to other. Yeah.
Okay, so from V3 to V2, can I reach? No. Yes. So that's why like this is a weakly connected graph. Okay, so we can also have the components in the network. Okay, so for example, this like this particular graph, it has 3 connected components. So first connected component is this, second one is this, and third one is this. Okay, similarly, in a bigger graph, I can have smaller strongly connected components. For example, I have these 3 strongly connected components in the network. So these strongly connected components can be used to identify the communities. So whenever we are trying to identify the communities, we can use these strongly connected components to identify the communities. Okay, so next is the shortest path. The shortest path is the path between 2 nodes that has the shortest length. So now, see, in the exams, you can be asked these short questions for 1 marks, like calculate the diameter, calculate the different parameters, and so on. So yeah, so what is diameter? Diameter is the longest, shortest path in the entire network. Okay, so for example, in this network, the maximum length of any path is 2. Okay, so that's why the diameter of this particular network is 2. Okay, so now next we will consider the special type of graphs. So now we have discussed the different measures, that is walk and trials and cycles. So we have considered these type of measures in the network. So now we will consider and discuss what all are the special type of graphs that we have. So first of all, trees. So what all are the trees? Trees are the networks that do not have cycles. Okay, so trees are a special case of undirected graphs. A tree is a graph structure that has no cycles. So this is very important. The trees, they do not have any cycles. So in a tree, there is exactly one path between any pair of nodes. So in tree, there will be exactly one path from one node to another node. And if we have the disconnected trees, that is called as forests. Okay. So yeah, so next we have the traversal algorithms. Okay, so what is traversal? Traversal is that you want to reach each and every node in the network. Okay, so there are two most popular graph traversal algorithm that are called as breadth first search and a depth first search algorithm. So again, these forms the basics of solving a lot of other problems. So that's why like we are discussing these algorithms here. So you might have covered these algorithms in data structures, right? The traversals, have you covered it?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am. In the first semester.
Okay, okay,
ECI.
okay. So time. Okay, so maybe like in the next lecture, I will give like I'll very quickly give you an overview of these algorithms. So we will not discuss in much of the details. I'll share the slides as well today. So in the next lecture, we will not spend much of the time here. We will quickly try to revise all these algorithms so that like when we are discussing other complex algorithms, so that time like we are aware of what we are talking about and how to calculate it. So yeah, so with that we will end our today's lecture. So any doubt anyone in today's lecture? So we have these few topics that need to be covered really quickly. So maybe this BFS, DFS algorithm, then Dijkstra algorithm. So I will share these slides. You can quickly have a look into this and like I'll also quickly cover these algorithms.
Ma'am,
So
what
then
is
we will.
one question? What is component I missed? I didn't explain.
Okay, so component is a subgraph. Component is a subgraph that is disconnected from the other graph. Let me give you the exact definition of the components. Just give me a second. Okay, so like here we have one component in the network. Okay, so since we have one completely connected graph, so the completely connected graph, that is one component. Whereas if we see this particular disconnected graph, so this particular graph will have two components. Okay, so first component is V4, the next component is V1, V2, and V3. The component is in an undirected graph is a connected subgraph. Okay, so the definition of component is it is a connected subgraph, that is there is a path between every pair of node inside this component. In a directed graph we have strongly in, so now when we discuss about the directed graph, there is this definition of strongly connected component where when there is a path u to v and v to u between every pair of nodes in that particular component. The component is weakly connected if replacing the directed edges with the undirected edges result in a connected component. Is it clear?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay,
I got
so
it.
here we have three components. So because there are three connected subgraphs. Okay, so this is the first connected subgraph, this is the second connected subgraph, and this is the third one. Okay, so similarly, when you are calculating the strongly connected components, so the whole network may be weakly connected, but then you have to see that whether there is an edge from one node to every other node in that particular component. So if we try to identify that, then this particular graph will have 3 strongly connected components.
Okay. And there cannot be any overlap, right? I mean, one node belongs to multiple strongly connected.
No, I don't think so. But like, I'll check it. I also have to check it once. I don't think so. I'll check it and I'll answer it in the next lecture. Mostly, I don't think.
Okay.
Anything else? Anybody? Okay. So with that, we'll end the lecture. Thank you, everyone. Happy weekend. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.